to welcome the audience and thank you for attending. Viewers may watch Board of Education meetings and board committee meetings live on TV 190 or online at tcaps.net/board. Recorded meetings may be viewed on demand at the same address. It looks like there is no public comment, so we'll move on to procedural items on draft committee meeting minutes. Is there any changes?
None from me.
Good to me.
All right, no changes, so remain as posted. Moving on to professional development, deferring to Dr. Van Wagner.
Okay, so we have the one that we have here is the NAEN conference. And so I will actually let Connie just explain a little bit on that, so.
Absolutely. So I was elected several years ago to serve on the board of directors for the North American Association of Educational Negotiators. It's our national conference for individuals who negotiate in educational settings. And so our conference every year is held in Clearwater. That's because it's also available to our friends in Canada. So North American, our contingency is both Canadian and American negotiators. And as a board member, I also serve as a presenter for the conference. So I'm requesting the board's permission to attend that conference in March.
Terrific. And it says in the memo you're going to be presenting, is that right? They don't give you a free ride as a presenter?
So unfortunately, this organization is not nonprofit, so they charge only enough for the conference to actually run the conference. So we do this as board members every single time. We have no money in the budget, even necessarily to pay for food for even the people who attend. So it's a bare bones organization. So we're all on a free for all. So fortunately though, I also serve as a board member for our state conference, our state organizations, and they are able to provide free conferences and room and board anytime I attend an in-state conference. So there's a little offset there for us.
Looks like a great conference.
Good opportunity.
Yep.
Thank you for
So
serving.
Thank you.
Do we place that on the full agenda, right, on consent?
On consent?
Consent.
Yeah.
I think it was fine on consent.
Yep.
Yeah.
Always looks good to have some of our people presenting at national conferences.
Yep.
So.
For sure.
All right. If there's no other questions on that, next item is board policy review, deferring to Connie Taylor.
So just one small revision for you on our medication administration policy. We've gotten a lot of questions of late as it relates to CBD products. And so with the legalization of marijuana in the state, we've seen a lot of upswing in CBD products that while it does not include the THC, it's not regulated by the FDA. So there is a possibility that some of the products could in fact contain THC if they're not regulated. So it was the recommendation of True Law Firm that we add a small provision just to show that CBD products are not to be administered in our school buildings. There is also a carve out for an exception for the superintendent to look at that. There could be something that's part of a 504 plan or an IEP, and in those cases, generally that would be a regulated, FDA regulated product. So we would have an opportunity to review that and approve it as needed for those students.
Okay, so I had a couple of questions. One is where it has the superintendent or designee will consider exceptions to this policy. That shouldn't that be on a separate line? Because as written, I couldn't tell if it applied to that sentence or if the whole policy.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. We can add it as a separate sentence. Kendall can make that adjustment.
And then my only other question on it was in this policy we define controlled substances, and the way it's defined would in legal terms indicate that it was used in the policy, but I don't see it used in the policy, like it's in quotes. Controlled substances are defined, but I don't see controlled substances used anywhere in the policy to define it.
Scott, could you point us to that? Are you looking
Yes,
at the
in
fourth
the
paragraph?
fourth paragraph,
I see what you're saying.
halfway through, it says controlled substances are defined, which usually when you do, in quotes, controlled substances and defining them is because you've used it somewhere and you have to define it, but we haven't used it to need to
Good
define
catch.
it. I'm guessing it used to be in there somewhere and has been removed.
I'm wondering, and we can take a look, I'm wondering often that corresponding to the policy is an administrative rule. if in the administrative rule, any of that is there, and this is where they operationally defined it.
That's what I would have thought, but then if it was in the Michigan Public Health Code would be the only way it would be, and then that would be defined in there. So usually you wouldn't define it. You would put as, well, I guess it does say as.
Identified in the.
I would say as
paragraphs
identified
above.
in.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I just wonder if it's referencing it somewhere else that's associated with this policy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
I
if the
get what you're
administrative guidelines talk about controlled substances and, you know.
I get what you're saying.
And treatment, and the other corresponding document to it, maybe they're operationally defining in the policy for the administrative guideline. We can take a look. I'm brainstorming here a little bit why it's in there.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're questioning. Why is it there when it's not
Yeah.
referenced in the above paragraph?
Yeah,
right?
and I was only bringing it up. I don't care if it's in there or not. My point, if we need it in there, that's fine. I was thinking that maybe in one of the previous revisions there was the word controlled substance that got removed, and the definition got left. Was why I thought it was there.
That's a great point. I'll take a look at the admin guideline as well for policy 5330.
I don't think it's a huge issue if it's
Why
in
don't
there.
why don't we leave it for now, let us do a little homework to see if there is a reason that it's there, there very well may be, or it could be, well, historically it was in there before and they struck the paragraph and it's still there, and, you know, you're right to maybe exclude it, so.
So, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But, just to have
You
it.
gotta believe it's somewhere for them to operationally define it like that, but.
Yeah,
where?
and that, usually it would be within the direct policy.
Yeah.
Or it would refer to the policy that it was. So that's why I wondered if it got
Yeah.
deleted before. But either way, it's fine. So if
Okay.
you can look
We'll-
into that,
we'll
that'd
look
be
at
I'll
great.
take a look at that.
We'll look at
for
that
you.
and let you know at the board meeting.
Yeah. And I wanted to clarify too, so what is the state law regarding CBD? Because federally, if it's sourced from hemp, it's legal since 2018. That's not the case for non-hemp sources, but what is Michigan law?
Currently, there is no guidance in terms of CBD. That's why it's important for us to have it in policy. So it's a district's determination on whether or not, because CBD is coming from so many multiple sources at this juncture. Like you said, some of it's derived from different sources, some of it is FDA regulated, some of it is not. And so in the absence of any sort of regulated product, and we won't know that necessarily if a student brings a product into school and gives it to the office and says, I put this lotion on my neck, or I take this in a particular tea, or I take a droplet. We won't know whether or not that's FDA regulated at this point. So that's why they're recommending that we have it in policy, so that if someone does want to use one of those products, we can individually evaluate that to make sure that that product does not contain THC products and is FDA approved for the prescribed or intended use.
But generally, just because, quite frankly, while I am a doctor, I'm not a medical doctor, we're going to say no, and then it would be an exception. They'd have to, they're gonna have to really make a case. It's not gonna be the person that's just going, oh, I just wanna have it in because, but like it, it's gonna be like I'm gonna want something probably from a medical doctor what is saying why that it's a good idea for them to do this, even if it's a quote-unquote off-the-shelf product, from that standpoint. Otherwise, it's a free-for-all. We don't know what they're bringing in. I think we gotta say no and then have an exception versus let it all happen without anything, and then we have a real problem on our hands.
Right.
And
But this is a district determination, so it's understood.
yeah, and CBD is generally not recognized as safe in food by the FDA. They've just said that they're not going to do anything about it as long as it doesn't cross state lines.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the other part is like they've basically said if it isn't targeted to kids, there's like 3 or 4. If you don't do this, we'll leave you alone, but we don't recognize it as safe. I think is the FDA's stance.
Right. There is one drug the FDA did approve for rare seizure disorders that contains
And that's my
CBD.
point. That would be an
So-
exception. We'd say no, and they say, well, wait a minute, it's this. And I'm sure at that point, then they're gonna have a doctor's note and be able to make a justification that I or my designee would be able to say, okay, that one has a legitimate purpose.
So the sentence, or I guess it might be a semicolon and attached second phrase, per Scott's comment, to consider exceptions to this policy, do you think that's clear enough that we would make medical exceptions, with a prescription, or do we have to explicitly state that, like?
No, because like I said, I think it needs to leave open to interpretation of the superintendent. Maybe there's something there. Maybe it's, like I said, maybe it's not medical, but it is in an IEP somehow. you know, that's there that was written in from a previous district. You know, I can't, you know, while I didn't have this, I can't say no because
Right.
if it's in the IEP. So I'd rather that it be that vague and give the superintendent authority and that the board trusts the person in the superintendent seat to be able to make a reasonable call on that.
Right, okay.
That was it for me. Any other?
Yep.
Do we need to move it onto the board meeting? Was this first reading? No. It's revised, so it doesn't matter.
It's a revision.
So do you want to move it on to discussion so we can have that, or do you want to just clarify that after?
You know, I would be fine clarifying in my superintendent's report, you
Okay.
know, there was just questions on that component. You keep it on consent,
That's fine.
if that's okay with the committee?
That's fine. I just wanted to have that.
We'll make
sure
sure,
we close
Stacy,
the
just
thing,
make
so
sure to note that I have that on my superintendent's report and to update the board on what we learned about that language.
That works for me.
Okay?
All right. And next item is reviewing the 2020 or January 2023 meeting agenda.
Okay, and I know we might have, I think, maybe at least one addition, so let's go through this. Have our call to order, our pledge, our review of the agenda. Because of the organizational meeting, we do not have a presentation ahead of recognition. So we do go right to the election of officers, which as superintendent, I will start. And then once we have a president, we'll be handed over to the president to continue on the rest of the positions within the leadership positions within the board. Then we will have the establishment of board committees and representatives. So that will be completed by the board as we go through that section. Then we will go to our first public comment, superintendent's report, our board committee reports, our consent agenda is there, and again, the medications and treatment is on that already from this standpoint. We have our personal recommendations. We do have the trip that was agreed to have on the agenda by the committee. Our organizational meeting items of mostly financial, which was reviewed by the Finance Committee. We have our minutes from December 12th. A discussion on the Board of Education Standards of Practice, which we have done each year. At this point now, I know one other item that was discussed is, Josie, you'd forwarded to us a MASB position that you would like put on the agenda.
Right, because
Right.
it's a time-sensitive
Yep.
deadline.
Okay,
January 11th, I believe, is the deadline by which MASB seeks applicants for the region that represents northern Michigan, including TCAPS.
okay.
For a
So
new-
if the committee's fine, we'll add that to the agenda.
Yeah, I think that would be after, so 10B.
Yep. Did we have any other items? Was
The
there?
pre-bond planning?
Yes, and so we have, we talked in committee, but it wasn't decided yet. So Christine and her team began on Tuesday the review of the applicants that submitted RFPs for the construction management and architect for the facilities review plan. And so while they have a pretty good idea and was able to lay out to the board committee a spreadsheet that had all of the different organizations, businesses that had submitted proposals and different things there, they won't have they weren't able to make a recommendation yet to the committee. So they'd asked the committee if it would be okay to bring that to the board on Monday night. And so the plan is to have a recommendation for the architect and the construction manager for Monday night.
Okay. So we should put that as C then?
Correct.
And then transportation, John.
And then a discussion also on transportation policy, and it shifted, just be honest with you, from Tuesday to Wednesday. And I've updated the board on our situation with transportation. We were looking originally at changing our policy to look at not providing transportation within 1.5 miles of a school, just because of our issue with not being able to have enough bus drivers. Unfortunately, after analysis was done on Tuesday afternoon, it was recognized that there just wasn't enough there of riders that it would make the difference in cutting any routes. So the reality is right now, we have to cut 4 routes to be able to sustain. And so we are at a point where, we are, I think we had a good conversation in committee yesterday, and Floyd, feel free to, chime in, that I think, we softened a little bit. Unfortunately, we really don't at the moment see things improving vastly for us to change it from the idea of going to a 3-day a week on one side, 2-day a week on the other side of town for high schools transportation. But what we want to do is maybe soften it and just make it a 3-week trial, and see if I'm gonna put a letter out to our parents, basically asking them to declare if they're able to bring their child versus having them on the bus. That might free up some room on some buses for us to reroute again at the beginning of February, to see if we can absorb possibly any routes. We at least want to try that at recommendation and discussion from the committee. And so at that point, we will let parents know if we've been able to achieve that, and we would have to sustain that. Or we get a flux of drivers. We are gonna try and do a little bit more of a deeper campaign to get the word out there. And just try to do, but what that's going to require, the reality is, of the things we're doing, we are starting to go against board policy as it sits. So what we're going to be asking for is just kind of a waiver at the moment, of much like we did with the property component, where you gave flexibility to the superintendent or designee. We're going to ask for some flexibility for myself and designee for that transportation policy, so we can do what we have to do to keep transportation going, even with somewhat of a less resources to provide to all kids. So, we're gonna work with BATA passes, we're gonna do everything, all that, but the reality is we're just not gonna be able to adhere to the current policy, but we don't necessarily wanna change the policy as much as we just want a temporary relief from it, and giving that authority to us. So that's what this is going to be.
To clarify, so the 3-week trial, that would be at the start of the second semester in late January?
No, it's gonna have to go, and it'll go 2 weeks, so pretty close, yes. I mean, at this point, but, we're gonna have to be ready to do it here, at the end of next week. That's when we would make that shift.
So maybe start next Friday, Thursday or Friday?
I actually think it'd be the Monday. But-
Okay.
So when is your letter coming out to parents?
Well, I'm debating that right now. Friday, possibly Friday, but I gotta get with Christine and talk a little bit about it, because I kind of want the board to have the discussion Monday, so it might not go until, Tuesday morning. Just kind of depending on timing here, but Ginger's working right now with her team and we're drafting it. So it's gonna be somewhere right there I just don't wanna preempt the board here, to be honest with you, with sending that out and without that discussion. But at the same point, wanting to let parents, everybody know. So I gotta get with my team and kind of debate that a little bit here.
So I'm looking at the calendar. So Monday, the 16th is actually our holiday for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, right? So there's no school.
Yeah.
It'd be Tuesday, the 17th, but the last day of the semester is that Friday, the 20th, right?
Yeah,
So what about kids who have exams?
yeah.
I'm just wondering about the transportation impact, like if kids cannot make it to school the last week of the semester when they have to take
Yeah.
exams,
Well,
that-
I'll get with Christine. I'll be honest with you. I hadn't asked her to nail down exactly, give me the dates. We've been just philosophically talking about weeks, and we talked in the committee yesterday. So I'll make sure I have that for the board. We'll update you, some point this week, kind of what that is. You're gonna see the back end, all those things for discussion points in a memo. That's why I'm probably leaning towards waiting until Tuesday morning to send the letter, to be honest with you, because I want to have the board discussion. I think it was very productive to have the discussion with committee, and if there's anything that came out of that discussion at the board meeting, I think I'd rather have that to influence something I send out to all of our parents before, and not do it before, and then wish I'd had something
Right.
we'd have said. So
just-
that's where I've been leaning, but, I told Ginger originally I wanted to go out Friday, but I've kind of thought about that over the last 24 hours, and that's where I'm pretty well sitting with it right now, so.
So just to clarify, so for instance, I've got my daughters, I think, registered on the bus just in case they need to, but
And
never
that's
have.
not really our issue. I mean, we will,
Does that matter?
it'll be very helpful if they declare to not
Oh,
do
that's what I
that.
wondered.
Because that's exactly what landed us here in the first place. So when we looked at the numbers, we thought the 1.5 miles would do it. And so then we had the drivers do an audit of the kids that actually were riding, and it turned out it was about half of what were on that sheet. And so once we looked at it, it wasn't enough to do what we needed to do. So what we would do at that point is we would have everybody declare, and then we're gonna keep an eye, and if the numbers consistently for that couple weeks are dropped off to where we think, okay, buses are half full now, then we could reroute, probably extend some ride times, which would, again, be different than the policy is. I think the policy now says an hour, I'm gonna guess, but like an hour, 15 minutes that a kid can be on a bus.
Morning or afternoon.
Right, we may have to stretch that, for instance, to that hour and a half, even an hour and a 45.
That's tough.
It is tough, right? But if that's what it takes to, if we have less ridership and to have enough kids, that's what we do. So, like I said, it's gonna be some data collection, it's gonna be looking, and it would be a lot of commitment from a lot of parents that, and again, it can't be, oh, we'll do this for 2 weeks and all of a sudden all those kids are back on a bus. We don't have any more drivers, so it would revert right back to where we're at. So it's gonna be, complicated, but again, I think there was some members of the board that wanted us to at least look at that and try that. And so we're gonna put everything out there possible and see what we can do. And again, say this is 3 weeks, we're gonna see what learns. Maybe it inspires some people to walk into the bus garage and 4 weeks later, they can, 5 weeks later, they can get their certificate and be in a bus. We'll see. But, at the point of the committee, we were ready to do this for the rest of the year. And I think to the committee's point, let's maybe see if there's absolutely anything we can try first before we, kind of call it the ball game, which I think had some real merit. And so that's the plan, and that's just gonna be the overall discussion. But to truly do it, we can't violate board policy. And so I'm gonna need some flexibility in board policy on the transportation policy a little bit here to be able to do what we're gonna need to do to explore everything we can.
Right. So just one last question from me. The 3-week shift to split days, is that going to be part of this quote letter to parents?
It would be.
It's really not just a letter, it's a survey, right?
It's not really a survey, it's really a letter that kind of puts Dyer out exactly, just be real with our situation.
Yeah.
And what it is going to say, if you're willing to do this, here's the link to
Right.
the form to say we are going to elect off of transportation.
Like opt out?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are we asking parents also to express their preferences of a
We
Monday?
did it a year ago.
Yeah, I remember.
And it was pretty
Yeah.
bold. We don't think we need to do that again from this standpoint. Quite frankly, we don't have time to kind of go through, we know, from that survey that parents have said we'd rather much know in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Because the only options are know in advance or, or find out that morning of.
Yeah.
And I had said that, yesterday the committee was asked, are there districts, I can tell you my former district, Alpena, I keep close watch just on social media, and I can tell you they've elected to go the other way, and every day there's a Facebook message in the morning that says, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so's bus will not be there today. They find out an hour and a half before,
Yeah.
and parents are scrambling for work and
Right.
stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
this is the plan, and we just wanna try and bring consistency of days, because you'll have a Friday that's every other there. And so that kind of idea is, I think, to string 3 together for a side of town.
Okay, so that's what I was referring to, is there gonna be a choice, serving parents, do you want to alternate days, or do you want to alternate weeks? Because there was some consideration of, we'll serve
Yeah.
West Side,
Yeah.
the week 1, Central Side, week 2, is that still?
Let me talk to the team
Works.
on that. We were not planning on doing another one, just didn't want to burden from that standpoint from data we already had from before, but, we can take a look at that.
I don't remember what the survey
Yeah, we
results
can
were
take a look
on
at
that
that.
one.
I understand what
That,
you're saying.
that might just be a decision that, part of the flexibility that you guys make, whatever's
Yeah.
best for the situation.
Yeah.
Whether it's week on, week off, or 3
I
and
don't
2
remember.
split.
Here was our thought with it, just from a professional standpoint. It was, let's say that if a kid has no way after that and we can't service, at least they would be in school half a week and half a week versus missing a whole strain.
Right.
So from a professional standpoint, we thought that made a lot more sense and better, that if that's the situation.
And week on, week off.
Correct.
Yeah.
And just,
Get your work, you could be on Brightspace, you might miss a couple of days, but, you would at least not have such a large
whole
break.
week.
If, God forbid, we're hoping we can pull off every way of bata passes and every other thing to get kids, but in the unfortunate circumstance or reality of if we face it, from that standpoint, we debated that, and that's where we landed on that thought.
Yeah.
And just in
These
case.
are just high school kids, remember?
Right,
It's
yeah,
just high
I was going to
school.
clarify that.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just high school. If people are listening this morning and didn't listen and weren't able to listen to yesterday's meeting, this is kind of brought on. We have been in dire straits for
I
bus
mean, the
drivers
newspaper
for
has
a
done
long
many
time.
articles on it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it should be common knowledge, unfortunately, at this point.
Right. But we did have a couple of resignations before the holidays. And also, to reiterate, transportation is not required,
Correct.
and which was a shock to me.
But also, we also have to transport all of our parochial and privates by law.
Right.
Of any
If
that
we
do.
provide
If
transportation.
we provide
we have to-
transportation to our fifth graders, we have to provide transportation to parochial and private fifth graders.
Right.
So some people have asked, well, why don't you just cut those routes? They're not TCAPs. By law, we're obligated to do that, and so that's a requirement we have to do. And that's kind of the rule by thumb is if you provide it to one of a grade, you have to provide it to all for a grade. It's either all or none is kind of the rule. You can't just pick certain, you know, parts from that standpoint that you do.
So then this will be St. Francis High School
That is correct.
won't have transportation as well.
correct.
Okay,
On those days,
right.
the west side kids, you know, when it's those and they live on the west side, it'll pick them up, you know, but when it's central, you know, the east side of town side, then they live on that side, on the west side of town, no, they won't be picked up then, just like our kids wouldn't be.
Right. So if anybody missed the memo, we need bus drivers.
You got it. You
I think
got
it'd
it.
be important in that letter to really highlight that if by opting out it will potentially help, because I know there's a lot of people who don't really realize after you explain to them, like, oh, I can just drive like.
Yeah, I mean, but it's
But to
gonna,
make
it's
it
gonna take a
clear.
critical mass.
I know, I get that.
You know, I mean, and it's gonna be a critical mass for consistent time throughout the rest
Which
of the year.
is why I think people aren't opting out, because they're like, one's not going to help. So I think that's why we're going to have to.
Yeah,
We have to make it clear, like, it will really help if a number of people choose this option
yeah.
in one go.
Yeah, and I'm looking at Ginger. I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can also encourage people to carpool. I mean, just from an
That's part of the conversation too, we
Yeah,
said.
I mean, the
Part is
traffic
in the letter.
congestion and the environmental
Yep.
impact of all
Yep.
these cars,
Yep.
the wait lines at the schools,
Yeah.
you know?
No, that was mentioned as well.
Yeah, okay. Great.
So, like I said, nothing, trust me, that any of us want us to be talking about, and, you know, and I've said many times, I mean, I've gone through the bus driver training, have my certificate, can tell you our people do a phenomenal job, paid training, you know, from the day you walk in and start, you know, you're paid, and our people do a great job preparing people for the test, you know, making sure they're not out there, you know, by themselves, you know, picking kids up before they're ready. I mean, it really, really is a team over there that does a great job from personal experience, I can tell you. And so if anybody has any interest, we'd really appreciate, you know, the opportunity to talk to them.
What is the starting wage, and how does that compare with BATA and
Do you have
Dean
that?
and so forth?
It's 22.
21 to 23.75.
Okay.
Now, I did get a piece of data yesterday that was, I thought was true, and I verified it's true. So Dean Transportation is a privatized transportation company throughout the state that does school bus transportation. The Intermediate School District Northwest Ed for all of the special ed transportation uses Dean Transportation. So Dr. Seglerk was able to get me information yesterday. Traverse City, right now, they are paying the highest wage of anywhere in the state
Oh my
for bus
gosh.
drivers. It's tied with Walled Lake is the only other district that is the same. Other than that, the Traverse City region for Dean and Walled Lake are the two highest in the entire state of Michigan that they're having to pay to try and get drivers across the state.
Plus, they get full benefits, whether they do the split shift.
Our
or the-
our drivers do.
Our drivers
Yeah,
do, yes.
our drivers do.
Whether they do the split shift
Right.
or the full day.
Yeah, and we're not losing drivers to Dean, so it's understood. So they're paying the most they pay anywhere in the entire state of Michigan in the Traverse City region.
But how does that compare with our
It is
wage?
important to note your question in terms of transportation being required. It is required for special education students
Yes.
if transportation's in their IEP.
Yeah, that is the one part where it is required. So, but the ISD provides that. But just to give you the idea of when I talked about our housing situation, you know, the compensation part, you know, we are in the worst market, you know, tied for number one in the entire state of Michigan for struggling and the wages they're having to try and pay just to try and recruit enough for them. and you might remember, they don't offer the legacy kind of components that we do. They don't have the state retirement that many of our drivers, especially veteran drivers, have in that element. Dean doesn't provide that, or really that entire benefits package that I think we have a really strong Blue Cross Blue Shield, package. And so it just highlights my point of they're struggling to get drivers just like us, and they're paying more than anywhere else in the state other than Walled Lake.
And this really is a statewide problem. It's
Yeah.
absolutely everywhere. It was all throughout Kent when I was there, and now here. I mean, I'll just put out, our communications department, I think, has done a phenomenal job. Right before Christmas, between the 19th and the 26th of December, we did a Facebook and Instagram blast for bus drivers particularly. It went out to 22,740 people, I believe, and unfortunately generated 168 clicks on our website. So, we're going to continue. Our team met this morning to brainstorm some ideas in terms of outreach, to try to reach more individuals who might be interested in the position, and certainly want to get some of our bus drivers' voices out there, because it really is, it's a tough job, and no one wants to sugarcoat that, but it's an extraordinarily rewarding job, and I think our bus drivers would attest to that. So we're going to continue to work on trying to get some more folks in, throughout this whole process, but in the interim, I think all of these measures are necessary.
And we want to stress, if somebody's looking for an 8-hour day, we have opportunities in between the morning and afternoon routes in the district to give them a full 8-hour day, full benefits, full, it's a blended retirement 403B package with the state. Very, very strong benefits package across the board with that. But if somebody wants to work full-time, we have a full-time job for them.
And John, I'll also mention, if there are individuals who are not able to drive, we still do need bus aides as well.
Yes, as well as custodial. We're 8 custodians down.
Correct. Yes.
We have work if anybody has any interest.
And just to put it in perspective, we are 15 bus drivers down.
Oh, my. Oh, that's,
Yeah.
what's our ideal number of drivers to have?
I want to say right now that he said we were at 53, so you'd add 15 to 53.
68.
Yeah. And here's the situation we're running into is that, our mechanics are driving, our maintenance supervisors are driving. They're starting to lose, track of bus repairs that need to be done. We have our state police inspection coming. And quite frankly, we've got people doing 2 jobs. If you've met Jeff Adamick, which I know many of you, I think all of you have, he's doing 2 jobs right now. He's driving a full-time route, and he's doing his full-time job of doors, of all the doors we're replacing, all that. He's our guy that does that for school safety. So he's doing that and a full-time bus route. And so we can't just, keep running these people, all over to a point where we're going to start to lose those people. And so we're at a dire point, and, we're just going to have to do some tough decisions and hope we can come up with some out-of-the-box concepts and some things to make it till maybe it gets better, that, maybe some people are looking for jobs more than they are in the area now. But again, hopefully we find some people, and maybe we get some lower ridership to be able to do some rerouting here in, a month or so.
You did say that training's paid, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Right, that's excellent.
Yep, training's paid. All of those things we take care of.
Okay. I'm feeling guilty, but I just want to say it's a conflict of interest for board members to drive a bus and serve on the board.
I know. I understand.
You can, phone Matt and Sue. Sue
Yeah,
loves to drive.
I know. I think she got out of Dodge already.
All right.
So we'll add those items to the agenda.
Yep. Was that the last change to the agenda? Was there?
I believe so. We good? Okay.
That was going as D,
And then public comment 2, closed session. And this will change. It has a new name based on the Open Meetings Act. Do you have what that?
Yes, security planning.
So that will be called security planning. And there is, what section is that?
It is 8K.
8K. So that actually is specific to the school safety component. Well, the emergency operations plan falls under that. This is really more specific to that school safety component.
so should we change that number 12 to closed session?
closed session
Security planning.
security plan.
And then in the description, do we have to add or change
The
anything
language
there?
will be changed, yes. Yep.
To reviewing the that emergency operations plan will be stricken.
Yep.
And the new there as well.
All right.
And then we will have a discussion out of closed session with Secure Education Consultants, their report. And again, the board will get to be able to hear and close the full report, but, you know, we are expecting to be able to, you know, hear and then also moving forward. We want to tell all of our parents as much as we absolutely can, but I think everybody also knows anything that is very secure, that is important to have, you know, in a much more private knowledge to make sure that we're ensuring school safety, that will not be a component that would be released from that. But we want to be as transparent as absolutely possible with maintaining that security that we need to. So we'll hear that, and then I'm sure there's going to be more from there. And then required of the grant that helped us pay for the consultant to come in and evaluate all of our buildings, we are required to have a public feedback regarding safety and security assessment that will also, so it's kind of like a third public comment, but this is specifically after we come back from the closed session and then that discussion item as per required of the grant.
But people who spoke during public comment 1 and 2 can still
They can,
talk
correct.
during
This
the-
is really not technically a public comment under the policy, so it is a separate element, so they could come back and bring public comment just specifically to this as well. And then we will have our closing remarks by the board president and adjourn.
Okay. Any other changes?
That's all I believe.
All right, then we can move on to informational items, HR.
Thank you. Relatively short staffing update today. I had wanted to talk about our bus driver situation, which we just addressed, but just we are now in retirement season. As we have shared with the board previously, we've offered incentives to our staff for early notification to allow for better planning and preparation in succession planning. We have distributed that information out to staff. To date, we have only received 2 teacher retirements. One was mid-year. Another will be at the end of this school year. And then we have one other individual who we had anticipated and have done some succession planning for, and that is our pupil accounting coordinator. She will complete her tenure here at the conclusion of our second count period. She's going to stay with us to help us through that. So we're, you know, we're hoping as folks have come back from the holidays and they start getting, you know, thinking about ending out the school year, we'll get some notifications so that we can share those with the board and begin to plan for that. Also, just related to that, we're scheduling to pencil in a save the date, our retirement reception for our staff on the 31st of May from 4:30 to 6. Location to be determined once we find out exactly how many staff we're going to be celebrating that evening. So that's coming down the line. And again, we are actively continuing to have our open interviews. Those dates are on our HR website for anyone who's interested. Just come on in if they're interested in any position, including some of our transportation, custodial maintenance, which we still have several vacancies. And just keep an eye on our website. They do a great job weekly keeping that updated in real time in terms of the district's ongoing staffing needs. I wanted to point out, just to circle back just a little bit for you on the board policy, our administrative guideline does reference controlled substance as it relates to what medications students can self-administer. So just so you know, there's the correspondence.
Leave it. That makes sense.
And that completes my report, unless you have any questions.
No, I was just looking at if the wording needed to. I think it's fine. So
We're good with that then?
I think so. Yeah, I just was trying to put controlled substances as referenced, but I was trying to think if it needed a word, but I think it's fine. So I'm good unless there's any other things that come up in it which we can cover in the board meeting.
And we'll make that modification for you on the policy. So as opposed to a period, we'll use a semicolon there for the exceptions to the CBD.
Yep. So, all right. Communications update. Phone to Ginger Smith.
Thank you.
So as a follow-up, we recently had updated the board on some Traverse City County ARPA grants that we had applied for. Of the 3 that we applied for, we did receive funding for 2 of those grants. We applied for $150,000 along with Northwest Michigan Health Services, who actually would be the fiduciary of the grant. That was provided in full. That will be provided to build the health center at West Middle School. So we're very excited to be able to move forward with that project. The second was a request for $20,000. We received $10,000 for the peer-to-peer sanctuary spaces at both West Senior High School and Central High School. So we are coming a long way with securing the funds for that space. In addition to that, we did also receive an additional $2,000 grant through the Rotary Good Works for that same space. So although we didn't get the full amount through the county, we did get a little bit more. So we're definitely getting closer to that final goal of $22,000 for that space. So we're excited for the amounts that we have received. And then I also wanted to just give a quick update on enrollment, because we are getting closer to that time when we start looking at next fall, believe it or not. And we've been working as a group to include some elementary principals and administrative assistants. And new for fall of 2023 is we're looking to have the option for online enrollment. We have done that for our preschool programming, but to extend that beyond for our junior kindergarten, and through 12th grade for families who would like to do that online. That will become a new initiative for TCAPS. And we're also moving forward with organizing open houses for preschool, junior kindergarten, and kindergarten to all be in February. So it will all be coming out very soon. So excited for next fall already.
What space are we converting into the peer-to-peer?
It was an art room that kind of is set on its own spot at kind of like along the bus route at West Middle.
Is it currently in use, or is it like
It
closed?
currently holds curriculum materials. We
Okay.
have one person that works out of that space, so part of that space will still be used for that. It does not convert the entire building, but it will have its own parking and entrance.
I was trying to figure out. So it'd have its own parking entrance.
For the
is it
health
too?
clinic?
No, that's the health clinic, right?
Yes.
So I was talking about the actual peer-to-peer area in the school.
Oh, yes, they are currently both using a space already. They have it, it's just not equipped
Yeah.
with furniture and lighting and all the things that make it feel like a sanctuary.
That's fine.
So this funding will provide the aesthetics that they are seeking to make the space feel comfortable.
That's fine. There's a few other state grants out there that match small amounts, but I don't think it will. I'll take a look at it, but I don't think it's going to fall in line.
Feel free
Has to
to
be an
share it with me if
activation of
you
new
find it.
activation of new space that was previously unusable. But I'll give you the maybe there's some language in there that allows it, but I can
Sure.
give you the program.
Great, thank you. So,
I just want to say congratulations for getting the grants. I really
you.
appreciate that TCAPS is constantly looking for grant opportunities. I hear that grant writing is a very specialized art form. There's always a need for good grant writers, and you've been successful in getting these, so thank you and your staff for those efforts. On the peer-to-peer, you said you need 22,000 total, so between the county and Rotary, where are we at right now?
I believe we also had another 5, so we will make do with what we have, but if we were to collect the full amount that we were hoping to collect, we do still need another, I believe, 5,000 for each building.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anything else at all? Any other items?
None for me.
All right. The next Board Executive Committee meeting is Thursday, February 2nd in this room at 9 a.m. Thanks, everyone. Meeting adjourned.